By the end of solo leveling, Sung Jinwoo has more than 10 million shadows under his command. For every new shadow soldier of a certain power level relative to his own, the system prompted him to give them a name, likely for the sake of fostering strong connections to his strongest soldiers. Originally, this was triggered by Knight grade soldiers, which is about A rank, but as he got stronger, the prerequisite got higher. So named shadows tend to be the upper echelon of his forces. But at a certain point, Sung Jinwoo unlocked his true Shadow Monarch powers and was able to get rid of the system entirely. So as you'll see, there are actually some unnamed shadows of his that are ridiculously powerful. We'll be breaking down the entire Shadow Army as we know it in order of strength. First up, we have Seojin. Now this shadow wasn't named by Sung Jinwoo. This was actually her name back when she was alive, and she is at the absolute bottom for a few reasons. First of all, she's a shadow that arose from a normal, unawakened girl. In life, she was terribly abused by her foster father since childhood. She eventually managed to get away from him, but when he tracked her down, she tragically took her own life. What's interesting about this is that by then, Sung Jinwoo's shadow extraction no longer required a corpse at all. He was able to turn a bit of her old and dried blood into trickling liquid and summon her shadow from that. He also modified her form to give her a new set of clothes since she was nude when she died. But what's even more remarkable is the fact that this is the first time we see Sung Jinwoo create a shadow from a regular person, at least in the manhwa version. In the web novel, things are a bit different. There, he created hundreds of shadow soldiers from regular people and some hunters who tried to save them, which wasn't easy for him since it broke his own rule of never using innocent souls as his shadow soldiers. But he did it because they were unjustly killed by the monarchs, supreme beings that rivaled his own power, and he needed their strength, although he did promise to release them once it was all over. And as the Shadow Monarch becomes stronger, the more enhanced the abilities of his shadow soldiers become. So once Sung Jinwoo stopped borrowing the Shadow Monarch's powers through the system, even his weakest shadow soldiers became a force to be reckoned with. It's almost poetic to think of Sung Jinwoo empowering a bunch of E-rank fighters who refuse to stay down. But as for Seojin, Jinwoo never planned on turning her into a proper shadow soldier in the first place. So after solving her case, he released her into the void. In the manhwa, whether or not he keeps her isn't addressed. It also skipped the fact that he erased all of her memories of her adoptive father by touching her forehead, which was another new aspect of his monarch abilities. After her, we have the Bearded Dwarves. Now, their inclusion in the Shadow Army is a bit unique, since we've never actually seen a living equivalent in the story. They're considered to be pretty much useless when it comes to warfare, yet they have their own dedicated region in the World of Rest, which is a virtually infinite world that Jinwoo's shadows live in when they're not in use. The Bearded Dwarves were not a part of the 130,000 shadows that Jinwoo had against the Monarch of Destruction. Instead, they were among the millions that joined during his 27 years inside the Dimensional Crack, which saw him kill all the invading monsters before they could arrive on Earth and bloated the number of his forces up to that remarkable 10 million mark. But although the Bearded Dwarves are lacking when it comes to combat, they are the most talented artisans in existence. Even for all his strength, not even Sung Jinwoo can downplay the value of good equipment. With his true monarch powers, Jinwoo can fabricate items like the system shop once did, but even he found the task to be pretty difficult. So craftsmanship isn't a talent to be underestimated. And since shadows can use numbers, the presence of the Bearded Dwarves among them serves to bolster their potential several times over. Next, we have the Jeju Island Ants. These things also have their own region within the World of Rest. But unlike all the other shadows there, they don't actually rest. They're always doing something to keep themselves busy, and that includes being torturers to people like Seojin's evil foster father, which is fitting since they're the most vicious and cruel members of the Shadow Army. And as to be expected of ants, they are also terrifyingly diligent when it comes to fulfilling their tasks. Even members of the upper bracket of the Shadow Army can't help but be on edge around them. The Shadow Monarch aside, Beru is the only one who could possibly command them. As the Shadows of 3rd generation ants, they are all at least elite grade soldiers, which is the equivalent of a B rank hunter. But given their high-mindedness, tendency to swarm, and sheer numbers, they can kill an S rank giant in a matter of seconds. Next is Min Byung-gyu. This guy was the only Korean hunter to die during the final raid on Jeju Island. He was an S-rank hunter who specialized in healing magic. In fact, he is the best healer in Korea, and the best human healer that we see in this series. However, his combat ability was only that of an A rank. Even still, he arose as an elite knight. But he was the shortest-lived Shadow Soldier since Sung Jinwoo dismissed him right after he healed Cha Hae-in. The guy was a pacifist, and only joined the raid for the sake of keeping his fellow hunters alive, which, despite dying himself, was totally accomplished. If it weren't for him, the entire Korean squad would have likely been wiped out even before Jinwoo arrived. But despite the brevity of his time as a Shadow Soldier, Min Byung-gyu retained enough sentience to convey a warning about Jinwoo's power to Cha Hae-in through a dream. And at the time, a Shadow Soldier being able to speak at all was remarkable enough. The Ant Queen comes next. As the boss of an S-rank gate, the Ant Queen was nothing to play with. Although they managed to isolate and kill her, the Ant Queen managed to hold her own against Korea's top hunters. And if it wasn't for Min Byung-gyu's healing under the guise of his stealth skill, two of them would have definitely died. As an S-rank monster, the Queen immediately became a general grade shadow, which on paper should have made her one of Sung Jinwoo's strongest shadows. But she turned out to be a liability. Although she had huge mana reserves, most of that was dedicated to reproduction. But since there's no birth and death, she lost more than half of her value right there. But to make matters worse, her presence also caused a disturbance within the Shadow Ant's command network. Very few things can override or bypass a Shadow Monarch's orders, and instinct happens to be one of them. So to avoid having too many cooks in the kitchen, Jinwoo got rid of her. From there, we have Kamish. This ancient dragon was the boss of the first S-rank gate in history, and his emergence changed the world forever. The name Kamish means undying flame, because even after death, his appearance still burns the world to this day. Pretty much all gate emerging monsters are programmed to kill humans, but as a servant of the Monarch of Destruction, Kamish's compulsion was on another level entirely. Hundreds of S-rank hunters from several different countries came together to stop him, and in the end, only 5 of them survived. And for that alone, they were given the title of national level hunters. But before they put him down, Kamish totally annihilated the west coast of the United States. And mind you, this was all over the course of a single day. Many countries lost their top hunters fighting an overseas threat. So for almost 9 years, every country avoided dealing with foreign conflicts. One dragon stunted global unity. To put things more into perspective, Sung Jinwoo's endgame weapon was a short sword named Kamish's Wrath. It was made from the dragon's sharpest fang and was a late masterpiece of Earth's greatest craftsman. Before then, his strongest weapon was the Demon King's Dagger, an S-rarity item with a base attack of 220. Kamish's Wrath didn't have a definable rarity, and boasted a staggering base attack of 1,500. Not even the weapons in the system store could compare. The most expensive broadsword's attack damage was just barely over 1,000. The dragon's desire to fight was so strong that when wielding the blade, even Sung Jinwoo couldn't tell if it was his will or the weapons that beckoned him to do so. With all that in mind, the only reason Kamish isn't higher up on the list is due to the fact that he was a temporary member of the Shadow Army. Because he'd been dead for so long, back then, Sung Jinwoo's shadow extraction was more like a delayed failure, and only lasted for a few minutes. So thanks to that, Tank is up next. In life, this big guy was an alpha ice bear. At first, he was an elite grade, then he made it up to night grade, which is like a transition from B rank to A rank. Unfortunately for Tank, he was never really that strong, and Jinwoo gained a far more notable Shadow Soldier on the same trip. His utility as a mount made up for that for a bit, but eventually he fell off on that front too. Because right above him, we have Kaisel. Originally the A-rank Wyvern Kaiselian, this Draconic Shadow Soldier was the only one Sung Jinwoo was able to gain from the Demon Tower. Due to their corrupted souls, demons are immune to shadow extraction. But because the Demon King was a clone of the Monarch of White Flames, the Monarch of Destruction, who happens to be the King of Dragons, gave him a Wyvern to look after him. Kaisel managed to go from being a Night Grade Shadow to an Elite Night Grade Shadow, so A rank to S rank. But the creature was never that good at fighting. So it just replaced Tank as Sung Jinwoo's primary mount on account of its ability to fly. However, Shadow Exchange seemed to make that irrelevant in most cases, and Kaisel fell into true obscurity once Jinwoo gained the ability to straight up fly himself. After that, we have the original Shadow Army. These angelic beings were originally the shadows of the heavens commanded by the rulers, which are the fated enemies of the monarchs. And when they died, Ashborn, the Shadow Monarch before Sung Jinwoo, claimed them as his shadows. They emerged from the largest gate in history to greet the new monarch and aid him in his fight against the Monarch of Destruction. There were over 100,000 of them, and they've been members of the Shadow Army for eons. Although their ranks are never explicitly stated, there is no reason to believe that they're anything lower than Elite Knight grade, which would make each of them at least on par with an S-rank hunter. So not only are they one of the most experienced fighting forces in existence, but there are roughly 20 times more of them than there are S-rank hunters on Earth. That said, they mostly serve as shock troops and haven't really displayed their strength in any especially notable ways, so I can't place them any higher. Which is why Jima managed to be placed right above them. Jima was a boss Naga, and a bit of a commemorative summon since he's from the Ajin Guild's first A-rank gate. He's an elite Knight grade shadow, so he's roughly on par with an average S-rank hunter. Aside from using a huge trident, he's known for being able to change his size. However, he was gained during a sort of in-between chapter. Despite his strength, he's probably the least memorable shadow that Jinwoo has named. He never got the chance to really do anything substantial and doesn't speak. His most impressive feat was the slaying of a giant. But even then, for one of the giants, Jima's target happened to be the only one that required a follow-up attack from Sung Jinwoo. Meanwhile, the other named shadows could do so without help. But speaking of giants, the numbers are up next. I call them this because instead of giving them proper names, Sung Jinwoo just designated them each a number. In the manhwa version, this was a little downplayed, with Sung Jinwoo counting 6 of them. While in the web novel, it was a way bigger deal since there are actually 29 of them, and it would have been 30 if one of them didn't run away to the ocean. And since they're all elite Knight grade shadows, he was actually a bit upset about losing one of them. But he was really happy about gaining them at all, since it was like suddenly having the strength of a whole new army. Now, the reason 6 of them are counted in the manhwa is because number 6 is their leader. With his shadow army being so huge, having several battalion leaders is a necessity, and goes beyond rank. The 2 strongest shadow giants were number 6, who had especially big hands, and number 22, who had a sturdier build. But despite his insane perception, not even Sung Jinwoo could tell which of them was stronger. So they fought, and number 6 just barely managed to win. From there, they played a notable role in just about every big battle Sung Jinwoo has been involved in since. But above them as individuals, we have Iron. As the shadow of the former A-rank hunter Kim Chul, Iron was Sung Jinwoo's first shadow from a human. As one of his earliest and most trusted shadows, Iron went from being Knight grade to Elite Knight grade. And by effectively being on the level of an S-rank hunter, he was far stronger in death than he ever was in life. But whether it was as Kim Chul or Iron, the guy had some serious anger management issues, and was prone to using excessive force and going overboard. Yet he always managed to be popular with his fellow shadows. Iron fought with a bit of a classic tank build. His Shadow Provocation was a taunt skill that compelled weaker enemies to mindlessly attack him. But because they needed to be weaker than him, he was better for dealing with mobs instead of truly credible threats. Now, unfortunately for Iron, there was a major timeline reset that caused him to be removed from the Shadow Army. When Kim Chul first met Sung Jinwoo in the new timeline, he felt a strong desire to bow. And when he confronted the guy, Kim Chul unconsciously sensed his former shadow comrades and their joy at being able to see him again. This actually drove him to tears, and made him wonder if the way he feels towards Sung Jinwoo might be love. That definitely wasn't going to fly. So Sung Jinwoo altered his memories and ended up making the guy less of a jerk as a way of thanking him for helping to save the world. But many years later, Kim Chul was mind controlled by another invading force and was used against Jinwoo's son, Su-ho. When Kim Chul died from the conflict, he was brought back to the Shadow Army as Iron once again. But it'll be a while before he's as strong as he once was. Although, he should have the potential to rise even higher this time around. But then there's greed. As the shadow of the S-rank hunter Hwang Dong-soo, Greed was both the strongest human shadow and the last shadow to be named by Sung Jinwoo. As a general grade shadow, he was on or above the level of high-tier S-rank hunters. Despite coming from a pretty foul and insufferable hunter, Greed was actually quite humble and obedient. All Shadow Soldiers are psychically linked to the Shadow Monarch's mind. The stronger Sung Jinwoo becomes, the stronger that bond becomes. This allows them to comprehend, experience, and express human emotions to a greater and greater extent. Sung Jinwoo hated Hwang Dong-soo for what he did to Jin-ho, and his shadow is named Greed as a permanent mark of his foolishness and folly. As such, Greed was totally repentant. That said, Greed doesn't actually end up doing much besides having a really cool design. At most, he flexed his way out of the Monarch of Frost's ice prison. He's bound to be someone's favorite based on how awesome he looks, but that's about all he's good for. And like Iron, he was lost to the timeline reset. But I hope he gets to rejoin the Shadow Army too. He'd probably get way more cool moments by fighting alongside Suho anyways. Placed above him, we have the Titan King. The Titans are a race of planet-devouring giants that are kind of like Galactus from Marvel. They're especially known for their evil nature and are extremely prideful, not to mention talkative. By condensing their massive bodies into smaller forms, they can achieve even greater power. The Titan King and his forces were the first outsiders to invade Earth after Sung Jinwoo annihilated the other monarchs. Before that, they were driven back by the rulers and their army of the heavens, and were drawn to Earth due to the crazy amount of power Sung Jinwoo emitted. Unfortunately for them, Jinwoo already had his army of 10 million shadows by then, so they were absolute light work. That said, the Titans ended up being a more diverse addition to the Shadow Army than most others. While they at first seemed to all be warrior types, a number of the hulking figures were more inclined towards magic. And since magic soldiers are the minority by far, that's pretty awesome. Now, during the young monarch's inheritance trial, the Titan King ended up being one-shot by a level 99 Suho. So at this point, he's kind of a One-Punch Man type joke character. But I honestly think that deserves at least a little bit of respect. By then, the Titan King had been a member of the Shadow Army for 30 years. And he was the only shadow allowed to test Suho who wasn't among Sung Jinwoo's original soldiers. Also, Sung Jinwoo himself only managed to hit level 97 after defeating the Demon King. So this guy was at least stronger than the clone of a monarch. And although the Titan King was killed mid-sentence during his first encounter with Sung Jinwoo, it's worth noting that he was killed by the literal strongest shadow in existence with the help of the next powerhouse on our list. Or should I say 3 powerhouses on our list. Because along with the original Shadow Army, Sung Jinwoo gained 3 Shadow Dragons. Now, all of these titanic threats were on the same level as Kamish, who, as we previously established, brought the Hunter world to its knees all on his own. It was universally accepted that if the entire world were to fight these things, it would not be a matter of win or lose. It would simply be a countdown of hours until humanity's extinction. They are just that strong. But compared to any one of them, Tusk is even stronger. This ever-loyal Shadow Soldier was previously a High Orc Shaman by the name of Cargogon. He was a dungeon boss of an A-rank gate, but was S-class himself. Cargogon commanded about 150 High Orcs, each of whom was on par with an A-rank hunter. He also had 4 elite guards. However, only 3 of them were able to become shadows since Jinwoo went a bit overboard on one of them. They went on to become bodyguards for Sung Jinwoo's loved ones. Back then, Cargogon's forces were 3 times larger than Sung Jinwoo's and were far stronger. Cargogon possessed the strongest energy Jinwoo had ever faced by then. And in solo leveling, generally, a person's energy or mana doesn't change. Hunter ranks are solely based on the measurement of a person's mana quantity. So for this to have been the case, Cargogon must have been stronger than every S-rank hunter in Korea. Because by then, Sung Jinwoo had already met the strongest among them. Appropriately, Tusk was a rare case in which it took multiple extraction attempts for him to become a Shadow Soldier, which is a testament to the High Orc strong force of will and pride. As a Shadow, Tusk became the first to be considered Elite Knight grade, making him the strongest member of the Shadow Army. And back then, Jinwoo's soldiers were weaker as shadows compared to when they were alive. Although Tusk didn't manage to stay the strongest forever, at the very least, he's been the Shadow Army's strongest mage for decades. Mages tend to be glass cannons. They have incredible firepower, but an inability to take a hit. However, Tusk is just as strong on offense as he is on defense. Hymn of Protection notably conjures a shield. Hymn of the Blazing Fire hurls fireballs. And Hymn of Combustion creates explosions or causes spontaneous combustion. But Tusk's premier spell is Hymn of the Fire Dragon. With it, he exhales a truly devastating torrent of fire. One that's made all the more impressive thanks to his go-to item, the Orb of Avarice. It causes magic damage to be doubled, which was made even better after the Elder of the Bearded Dwarves fashioned it into a draconic staff for him. Speaking of dragons, Tusk has a pretty good relationship with the ones in the Shadow Army. He asserted his superiority by comparing their firepower, and ever since then, they've even been willing to let him ride on their backs. Not to mention the fact that Tusk is one of Sung Jinwoo's most trusted shadows, so all shadows regard him with a degree of reverence. But even in cases where traditional attacks fail, Tusk is still a master of various curses. And curses, although they may be nullified, are impossible to evade. Hymn of Agony is a curse that inflicts insufferable pain. Hymn of Blindness is a curse that removes a person's sight. Hymn of Frenzy is a curse that increases the amount of damage a target receives from attacks. Hymn of Lethargy is a curse that fixes a target in place. And Hymn of Slumber is a curse that drains a creature's stamina. Mind you, all of these curses can be stacked on top of one another. The only way someone to be able to nullify any of them would be thanks to a blessing or removal magic with greater power than his own, which is absolutely no one on Earth. You'd have to at least be Monarch level at this point. And if that's not enough, Tusk still has blessings. Hymn of Giants allows him to alter his size. Hymn of Strengthening lets him increase a target's strength. And Hymn of Rage increases anger and aggression to the point where attack power gains a major boost. Aside from the high orcs he commanded in life, Tusk also commands all the magic wielders in the Shadow Army. And funny enough, he's the only Shadow Soldier who wears actual clothes. He liked one of Sung Jinwoo's fits so much that he personally commissioned a replica. But above this silly high orc, we have the ever-serious Igris. Igris was the first Shadow Soldier that Sung Jinwoo ever named. He's risen through the ranks more than any other, from Knight Grade to Elite Knight Grade to Marshal. Igris once served the previous Shadow Monarch Ashbourne and was the greatest knight there ever was. He earned the moniker Knight of Death due to the countless foes he's cut down in the name of his master. Although he's not the strongest Shadow Soldier, he is the greatest swordsman by far. For a time, he wielded the Demon King's Longsword, an S-rank item with a base attack of 350 and the ability to summon a storm of endless lightning with each swing. Just behind Kamish's Wrath, it was the second strongest weapon that Sung Jinwoo owned, which is to say that for most of the story, it was the strongest. Although these days, Sung Jinwoo's wife uses it instead. But seeing as Sung Jinwoo moved on to fabricating his own stronger versions of Kamish's Wrath with his Shadow Monarch powers, the same is likely to be the case for Igris' weapon too. Now, although a Monarch should be stronger than Igris, due to the nigh immortality he possesses as a Shadow Soldier, it wouldn't take long for him to wear down and kill one. In fact, the Monarch of Frost was terrified by that very possibility, one that was also posed by the second strongest member of the Shadow Army, Beru. In life, Beru was the Ant King, an S-rank monster and the very pinnacle of his species. This one-of-a-kind killing machine was created for the sole purpose of annihilation. In a matter of moments, he was able to slaughter 10 S-rank Japanese hunters using minimal effort, and that included the country's strongest hunter, Goto. As for the Korean hunters, he detected Min Byung-gyu despite the S-rank's active stealth skill and killed the essential healer a second later. Then he fatally wounded Cha Hae-in with one blow. And Sung Jinwoo aside, she is Korea's strongest hunter. Prior to Sung Jinwoo showing up, the only reason the Korean hunters stayed alive was because the Ant King was toying with them. Sung Jinwoo placed the Ant King on the same level as the Demon King, and postulated that the Ant King might even be stronger in certain ways. Understand that this is a comparison between a copy of a being from the beginning of time itself and a newly hatched ant. Hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby. And somehow, the baby has the edge. While his strength serves as a true testament of his incredible power, Beru's true weapon is his virtually incomprehensible speed. He's so fast that Goto couldn't even react before losing his head. As a Shadow Soldier, Beru's loyalty to Sung Jinwoo is beyond the point of fanaticism. But even still, as a being whose core function is killing, Beru's instincts to do so are so strong that they can even supersede the Shadow Monarch's orders at times. It's like being ordered not to breathe. No matter how desperately you want to obey, or how long you can hold out, eventually the need to do so eclipses everything else. Beru began as the first General Grade Shadow, and ascended to Martial Grade once Sung Jinwoo gained his true Monarch powers. When he saw Beru, the Beast Monarch expressed the fact that a single General Grade soldier is practically a god of destruction. To know that he's beyond even that is mind-boggling. Yet even with such absurd levels of power, Beru can make his presence virtually undetectable, which is to say that he has complete control over his own mana. Now, although Beru isn't the strongest Shadow Soldier, that eventually changing isn't impossible, mostly due to Beru's Gluttony ability, which gives him the greatest potential among Shadow Soldiers by far. With it, Beru can absorb the skills and knowledge of whoever he eats. If the whole Ant King thing wasn't clear enough, this ability is very similar to Meruem's ability to devour aura from Hunter x Hunter. Early into his existence, the Ant King ate a sea snail and gained the skill Paralysis Poison. One of the deadliest organic poisons in the world was forcibly evolved into a concentrated mix that contained his magical energy. With just a scratch, a creature's entire nervous system will shut down in a matter of seconds. Gluttony is such a powerful ability that aside from the sequel series where he's mostly just a helpful mascot, the story mostly ignores it. Like I said, the Ant King killed 10 S-rank Japanese hunters, yet Min Byung-gyu was the only one that he ate. He clearly saw the value of the Korean hunter's skills, but was disinterested when it came to the other S-rankers. To be fair, he killed all of those guys so quickly that they didn't even get to show anything off. But if a snail was able to do that much, it's hard to imagine that the tens of thousands and later millions of enemies that were killed during his time as a Shadow had nothing to offer. And it's not like he needs much to gain the benefits. He only ate Min Byung-gyu's head to gain his skills, and the body was still intact enough for Sung Jinwoo to use Shadow Extraction on it. But from that consumption, Beru gained the greatest healing magic in the series, which has only been made stronger in his capable claws, to the point where he's regarded as the greatest healer there ever was. And as the first human he devoured, Min Byung-gyu's personality and interests have had a noticeable effect on Beru. Min Byung-gyu was a history buff and absolutely loved historical dramas, which is why Beru goes so overboard when it comes to the praise of his king. He also watches those sorts of shows so much that Sung Jinwoo had to consider blocking the channels. But I can't blame him, some of those are actually pretty good. And although he's not so capable when it comes to magical artifacts, Beru has excellent crafting skills and is the one who made the robe for Tusk. From the moment of his birth, the Ant King could easily defeat any threat below a nation-level hunter. And now, as a martial grade Shadow, most monarchs would struggle to last against him. But even he is no match for Belian, the first Shadow, and by far the strongest. Belian was born countless eons ago from the fruit of the World Tree. But since the death of the Absolute Being, the World Tree no longer bears fruit, thus making the existence of such beings like Belian increasingly scarce. In life, he served as the Shadow Monarch Ashbourne's lieutenant. He continued to do so in death as the first soul to join the Shadow Army. As such, he is the only Grand Marshal grade Shadow to have ever existed. Rulers all possess 6 wings. The typical soldiers of the heavens have 2. As a testament to his station, Belian naturally had 4. He emerged from the largest gate in Earth's history along with the other members of the original Shadow Army. As a Shadow from time immemorial, Belian considers martial prowess to be above all skills. He's a pretty reserved guy, but takes discipline very seriously. He beat the natural pride out of the Titans and vowed to punish Iron personally for disrespecting their king if he ever rejoins the Shadow Army. And since he did, it's only a matter of time. Bellion's weapon of choice is a very unique centipede-like blade that's made up of several dozen connected sections. As such, his every swing is wholly unpredictable. Although Sung Jinwoo would have no trouble following the movements, even he couldn't foresee them ahead of time. Even with time slowed to a crawl, to the point where even Beru's top speed is sluggish, the weapon is still able to move incredibly fast. Even without it, Bellion can concentrate enough mana in his fist to distort space and shatter the head of a dragon in one blow. But he generally hides his absurd magical energy out of respect for his king. To further exemplify his position at the pinnacle, Beru challenged the Grand Marshal for the position and was defeated with minimal effort. And that's despite Bellion receiving a chilling distraction from Sung Jinwoo. Their fight is more in-depth in the web novel as compared to the manhwa. But in both versions, even the full exertion of Beru's strength was not enough to make Bellion move an inch while restraining him. It's a good thing he showed up after the Beast, Frost, and Plague Monarchs were killed. Otherwise, it would have hardly been much of a fight. But strength aside, let us know who your favorite members of Sung Jinwoo's Shadow Army are. For me, it's easily Beru, but Tusk is a close second. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.